Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And I've been reading a few of the comments, and I kind of wanted to touch on, do kind of a filler video in between my part 1 and part 2 video. And I wanted to briefly talk about the boogeyman, Baba Yaga, the ACE exam. And I kind of wanted to just review the ACE exam for a minute because the ACE exam is not necessarily that bad, and it's also not something that you have any control over. Because the ACE portion stands for acceptable clinical evidence, but the MDEO contract, like the contract between the VA and the examiners, the CMP examiners, both VHA and vendor, they have the right to offer ACE exams. Like, we are mandated, actually, that's probably the better way to put it. We are mandated to give the vendors the opportunity to decide if they can do an ACE exam. Now, on an exam request, if the condition qualifies for an ACE exam, then we have to give them an ACE exam. If the condition does not qualify for an ACE exam, then it will say, the exam request will say, this unable to do ACE exam in person must be done type thing. And this manual reference right here, this 4.1.2a 4b, gives the instances in which ACE exams may not be requested to the examiner. So when necessary electronic medical records are not available for examination review, I want to say that this might be fire-related claims. So, like, if you have a veteran whose STRs got burned in the fire, that might not be a good one. Separation health assessments, so for BDD and IDES claims, they can't be done. So they would have to do a SHA. And that's kind of like the pre-discharge version of a general med exam, which I'm giving you terms that you probably don't understand. General medical exams are the exams that you get whenever you are within a year from your RAD, your release from active duty. So that's a type of exam that is given out for that time period. These two are time specific. Like, the first one's in service only. General medicals within a year from your release from active duty. TBI claims cannot, because they have such they're very long and they're very detailed, and you have to get like in-person exam. It's mandatory. Same thing with mental health exams. Mental health exams cannot be ACE. They cannot be done ACE. They have to be an in-person, and in-person can translate to telehealth, but it can't be just an evidentiary review. You have to have some kind of interview with the veteran themselves. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up ACE is because it is contractually obligated to offer the opportunity to the examiners. There are very few times that the examiner will actually take the opportunity to do an ACE exam where they don't actually do a face-to-face visit. And the reason why they don't take that opportunity is because there's a higher likelihood for them to get an insufficiency clarification, a clarification deferral, or an insufficiency exam deferral. And they can get in trouble for an insufficiency exam. So they typically like to do full range of motion reviews and whatnot. And because the ACE exam is required, right? You can even have it to where, even if I wanted to defer back, like, let's say I got your claim and you got an ACE exam, and then I reviewed it and there was some kind of insufficiency, or let's say I was going to deny you and we didn't review all the theories of service connection. Okay. What would happen is, if I had a different theory for service connection that I could apply to your claim, I would defer the contention back, and I would actually, get an exam for a medical opinion. We've already finished the DBQ. I'm just running down an alternative theory for service connection. Well, even medical opinions are ACE exams. Everything is an ACE exam if it is not this. So what happens is a lot of veterans will see, like, oh man, I had an ACE exam. Okay, but did you, and they didn't meet with me. Well, sometimes they don't need to. Like if they're doing a medical opinion doesn't require you to be there if you've already completed the DBQ and the DBQ itself is substantially complete. So I just kind of wanted to point it out that it's not a bad thing and it is rarely actually used. Like some of the highest conditions or contentions that typically use the ACE exam is whenever you have something that is primarily like lab work, like uh, hypertension. Like hypertension does not need you to be there to basically get a baseline of the predominant blood pressures that you have. Is it predominantly higher than 160 or is it not? And just predominantly means just more often than not. So, like, blood pressure is one of the ones that, they can do that with typically because there's not a lot of moving parts to the hypertension examination. And there's no real drawback to you not being there because if you have a long-standing blood pressure routine, like if you routinely go to the doctor and you get your blood pressures taken often, then that's just a mathematical equation for them. They just add them all up and divide them by the number of instances, and that's your average. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about the ACE process, and just touch on it just a little bit to kind of maybe give some understanding to those that have no functional understanding to it and potentially make it to where you don't get upset if you get an ACE exam. It's not that they're trying to get one over on you. It's not any less of an exam than anything else because the majority of the time, like 80 to 90, well, actually more than that, 90% of the time and greater, they don't actually opt for the ACE process and will do the face-to-face visit with you. It is actually quite rare to not have a face to face with an examiner. Now, you might disagree and say, "Look, I spent 5 minutes with the person and they weren't the best. They didn't even touch me or whatever." But technically, they were with you, so they didn't enact the ACE portion of it. So, and then there are some conditions that legitimately, like I said with mental health, can't be done ACE or shouldn't be done ACE. There are some conditions that I would say should not be done ACE. And that would be like muscular skeletal, anything with a range of motion. Because the majority of time, uh, your private or your VA examiner or your VA doctor, they don't measure the range of motion like you do for a DBQ, right? Like they'll just say, yeah, he can bend it to like maybe this degree, but it wouldn't be sufficient to do an ACE review exclusively on a muscular skeletal range of motion issue because they'd have no frame of reference to pull the numbers from. So if that came before me, I would call a little bit of that's inappropriate and they would get an insufficiency exam. Hey, you failed to provide the requested information, the range of motions. You failed to, there's also a clause for a range of motion that says that uh, flare ups have to be accounted for. So they would have to talk to you in some way, shape, or form to resolve that requirement for the musculoskeletal portion of like increase exams or whatnot. Um, a lot of moving parts. But so yeah, just to summarize, the ACE exam is a mandatory feature that has to be offered. Now, whether or not they take it up, that's on them, and they're rolling the dice to see if I'm going to give them an insufficiency deferral. But these are the situations in which they do not have, like, they can't do it. And if you get an ACE exam like, if they schedule you for an ACE exam for, let's say, a gen med, that exam is actually deficient and we have to cancel that exam and reorder that exam if the VSR catches it. If they don't catch it and I do the exam, or I should say, let's say the examiner does the ACE exam, but doesn't, they actually see you and they don't just do an evidence review and they see you. Would that exam be deficient to rate? And the answer would be no. It wouldn't be deficient to rate if it wasn't caught. If it is caught, then what's supposed to happen is the VSR is supposed to cancel any exam that was ordered on ACE that's on this list and reorder them correctly, so that way they're non-ACE exams. But yeah, so that's about all I got for you today. I'm going to see if I can do this in one take. And if I can, I'll put it out tonight or tomorrow. Um, yeah, so it's really not that bad, guys. ACE exams aren't that bad because they're rarely used. But I have rambled enough. So anyway, thank you for listening, and Raider out.